Breaking news in Washington, D.C., a shocking twist in one of the most talked-about legal battles involving former President Donald Trump. Judge Tanya Chutkan has officially dismissed the case without prejudice. But what does that mean? Does it give Trump a free pass, or is this just a pause before an even bigger legal storm? Stick with us as we unpack the full story, analyze the implications, and discuss the likelihood of a future prosecution. To fully understand this dismissal, we need to rewind and examine how we got here. This case didn't appear out of thin air. It's deeply connected to the events of January 6, 2021, the day the U.S. Capitol was stormed by hundreds of rioters seeking to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. That day, Donald Trump held a rally just a few blocks away, telling his supporters to fight like hell. What followed was chaos, violence, and destruction inside the Capitol building. The fallout from that day led to multiple investigations, including a high-profile inquiry by the U.S. House of Representatives and, later, the appointment of special counsel Jack Smith to probe Trump's potential criminal role in the attack. On August 1, 2023, special counsel Jack Smith unveiled a sweeping indictment against Trump. The charges were not minor misdemeanors, they were heavy felonies aimed at holding Trump accountable for his alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The first charge, conspiracy to defraud the United States, accuses Trump of attempting to deceive the federal government in order to stay in power. Next, obstruction of an official proceeding alleges that Trump directly interfered with Congress's certification of Joe Biden's electoral victory. And finally, conspiracy against rights is a civil rights-era charge used to prosecute those who attempt to deny people their rights under the law, in this case, the right to have their vote counted. These are not your typical white-collar crimes, these charges carry serious weight. Trump's legal team wasted no time in fighting back. They argued that Trump's actions leading up to January 6 were part of his official duties as president, and as such, they are protected under presidential immunity. They also claim that his calls for people to fight were simply examples of free speech protected by the First Amendment. His defense team even went as far as to accuse prosecutors of selective prosecution, suggesting that Trump is being unfairly targeted because of his political status and 2024 presidential candidacy. Trump wasn't just up against an ordinary prosecutor. This case was led by special counsel Jack Smith, a man known for handling some of the toughest cases in the U.S. legal system. Appointed by Attorney General Merrick Garland, Smith was tasked with investigating Trump's role in two major cases, the January 6 attack and Trump's possession of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. Smith's reputation as a relentless prosecutor gave this case a level of intensity rarely seen in political legal battles. With Trump facing up to 20 years in prison if convicted, the stakes could not be higher. Prosecutors aimed to prove criminal intent, that Trump knew the election was legitimate but still conspired to overturn it. Trump's defense countered by arguing that he sincerely believed the election was stolen and that he was acting within his rights to challenge the results. This clash of narratives created one of the most closely watched legal showdowns in U.S. history. But just when it seemed like the courtroom battle was ready to hit its peak, something unexpected happened. Judge Tanya Chutkan dismissed the case, without prejudice. What does that mean? Is it a win for Trump, or a sign that the battle is far from over? Next, let's meet the woman at the center of this legal storm, Judge Tanya Chutkan. Appointed by President Obama in 2014, Chutkan is known for her tough stance on January 6 defendants. In fact, she's been one of the harshest sentencing judges in those cases, often giving harsher sentences than prosecutors recommended. This made her selection to oversee Trump's case even more controversial, with Trump and his allies frequently claiming that she is biased against him. Why did Judge Chutkan dismiss the case without prejudice? There are a few possible reasons, and it's likely a combination of factors. Some experts suggest that the case was dismissed due to gaps in the evidence presented by prosecutors. It's not uncommon for prosecutors to be given more time to gather stronger evidence before proceeding with a case as high-profile as this one. Another reason could be a strategic delay. We've seen high-stakes cases like this unfold slowly, with the prosecution taking time to build an even stronger case. By dismissing it, without prejudice, Chutkan may have created the necessary breathing room for prosecutors to solidify their case and avoid any future legal setbacks. Lastly, procedural issues could have played a role. Sometimes, technicalities or errors in how the case was presented can cause a judge to dismiss it temporarily while giving prosecutors the chance to correct those issues. The question remains, can Trump weather the storm of legal challenges and still win? The case may be paused for now, but Trump's future, both politically and legally, is far from settled. Stay with us as we explore the possible outcomes of this case and what they mean for Trump's 2024 bid. Now that we've explored the dismissal of the case, without prejudice, the burning question remains, will Donald Trump face future prosecution? With the case paused but not gone, what does the road ahead look like? Is a future prosecution realistic? Let's break down the factors at play and evaluate whether a refiled case or new charges are inevitable. One of the key factors in whether Trump will face prosecution again depends largely on the strength of the evidence. Special counsel Jack Smith's team has been working tirelessly to build a case against the former president, particularly focusing on his role in the January 6 Capitol riot. Key evidence includes documents, testimonies from witnesses, and communications that could implicate Trump in orchestrating or encouraging the insurrection. However, it's no secret that high-profile cases like this come with challenges. Prosecutors must ensure that every piece of evidence is airtight, especially when it comes to high-ranking figures like Trump. The defense will undoubtedly scrutinize every bit of evidence, looking for flaws or inconsistencies. So, prosecutors have to be extra careful. This dismissal gives them the opportunity to shore up any weaknesses before refiling. So, what charges could Trump potentially face in a future prosecution? Legal experts are weighing in on several possibilities. The most prominent among them include conspiracy to defraud the United States, allegations that Trump tried to unlawfully overturn the 2020 election results. Obstruction of Congress, involvement in obstructing Congress's certification of the election results. Sedition, charges of inciting rebellion or sedition, which would carry severe penalties. Incitement of insurrection, given Trump's comments on the day of the Capitol riot, this charge has been mentioned as a potential avenue for prosecutors. While some of these charges might seem like long shots, experts believe they are not entirely off the table. The evidence may not only focus on January 6 but also on Trump's efforts in the weeks and months leading up to the insurrection. With the 2024 election fast approaching, timing becomes an increasingly important factor in whether Trump will face future prosecution. Legal experts are divided on whether charges can be filed before Election Day, but the clock is ticking. The legal system moves slowly, especially in cases involving such high-profile figures. Some believe that prosecutors might wait until after the election to bring charges, as any legal moves made before November 2024 could be viewed as politically motivated. However, others argue that prosecutors will move quickly, aware that the longer they wait, the more chances Trump has to rally his supporters and turn any legal battle into a political advantage. The closer we get to Election Day, the harder it may be to charge a sitting or campaigning presidential candidate without it appearing to be a political maneuver. Another key factor in this equation is whether a former president can actually be prosecuted. The idea of prosecuting a sitting president is a hotly debated topic, but Trump is no longer in office. So, can he face legal consequences for his actions as president? History provides some insight. Richard Nixon, for example, avoided prosecution for his role in the Watergate scandal after resigning, largely because of a controversial pardon by his successor, Gerald Ford. Bill Clinton, on the other hand, faced impeachment but was never criminally prosecuted for his actions related to the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Trump's situation, however, is different. While Nixon's case was about executive overreach, and Clinton's about personal conduct, Trump's alleged actions surrounding the Capitol riot touched directly on issues of national security and the integrity of the election process. Legal experts suggest that, given the severity of these allegations, the legal system may treat Trump's case differently. A future prosecution of Trump would undoubtedly have major political ramifications. If the case is refiled, it could create a significant distraction in the lead-up to the 2024 election. Supporters of Trump might see the legal action as an attack on their candidate, which could rally them even more strongly behind him. On the other hand, if charges are pressed, some independent voters and moderate Republicans may view Trump's legal challenges as proof of his alleged wrongdoing, potentially damaging his campaign. Ultimately, a future prosecution will test whether the legal system can stand apart from the political pressures of an election year. It will also determine whether the public believes that the law is being applied fairly, or whether it's being manipulated for political gain. Ultimately, the big question remains: will Donald Trump be convicted if charges are brought against him? While it's too early to say for certain, several factors will influence the outcome, including the strength of the evidence, the political climate, and the public's view of the case. Prosecutors will need to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, and Trump's defense team will undoubtedly work hard to undermine the charges. The political backdrop could also play a significant role in shaping the outcome, especially if the case stretches into the 2024 election season. As we look ahead, the future of Trump's legal battles is uncertain. The question of whether he will face prosecution is still up in the air, but as we know, the legal system can change at a moment's notice. Will he face charges before the election? Will the case drag on into the next presidential term? Stay with us as we explore the possible outcomes in the final segment. When the news broke that Judge Chutkan had dismissed Trump's case without prejudice, the former president didn't stay quiet for long. His reaction, as expected, was loud, defiant, and strategically calculated. But was it a sign of relief or a declaration of victory? As soon as the decision went public, Trump took to his social media platform, Truth Social, to frame it as a win. His post read something like this: "Another witch hunt exposed. They have nothing, absolutely nothing. This is what happens when they come for me with fake charges." His team quickly followed suit, pushing the narrative that the dismissal was proof that the case was baseless from the start. Supporters of Trump echoed this sentiment, flooding social media with hashtags like #WitchHunt and #JusticeForTrump. But, legal analysts were quick to point out that this wasn't the victory Trump made it out to be. Dismissing a case without prejudice means it can be refiled, something Trump didn't mention in his statements. Still, his strategy was clear: turn the setback into a PR win and keep his supporters fired up. While Trump was busy declaring victory, his legal team took a more measured approach. Trump's attorneys framed the dismissal as a result of prosecutorial overreach and a weak case. They emphasized that the decision was a sign that the government had no real evidence against Trump, calling it a desperate attempt to undermine a political rival. But behind the scenes, some legal analysts suspect that Trump's lawyers see this as a temporary reprieve, not a total victory. Lawyers know that, without prejudice, means the case could be refiled, and they'll have to prepare for that possibility. This could be a chance for Trump's legal team to adjust their defense strategy, refine their arguments, and prepare for a potentially stronger case if prosecutors come back with more evidence. As expected, the media response was sharply divided. Pro-Trump media outlets like Newsmax and certain Fox News commentators declared it a major victory, pushing the narrative that Trump had beaten the system once again. On the flip side, mainstream media outlets like CNN and MSNBC emphasized that this was only a procedural setback and that the case could be refiled. Headlines read, "Trump's legal battles are far from over," and "Case dismissed, but it's not the end." Media personalities on the left used the moment to highlight Trump's long history of declaring victory even when the reality is far more complicated. Legal analysts on these networks reminded viewers that prosecutors now have more time to strengthen their case, which could lead to even more serious charges. Public opinion also followed familiar partisan lines. Trump supporters took to social media, claiming victory, and some even celebrated the news at Trump rallies. Videos of supporters waving Trump 2024 flags circulated online with captions like, "Justice for Trump," and "Another loss for the deep state." But not everyone was convinced. Trump's critics were quick to point out that this wasn't a clean win. Social media was filled with posts like, "Without prejudice means they're coming back for him." Anti-Trump commentators called the celebration premature, warning that the legal system was just getting started. Meanwhile, independent voters and moderates took a more cautious stance. Many expressed confusion over what "without prejudice" actually means. To the untrained eye, the words "case dismissed" might seem like a victory, but legal scholars clarified that it was more of a legal time out than a true win. If there's one thing we've learned from Trump's political career, it's this: he knows how to control the narrative. Over the years, he's developed a playbook for moments like this. When faced with bad news, Trump doesn't retreat, he attacks. He reframes defeats as victories, dismisses criticism as fake news, and tells his supporters that "they're not coming for me, they're coming for you." This strategy has been remarkably effective. His supporters have grown used to hearing that every legal challenge is part of a larger, witch hunt against him. By spinning the dismissal as a total victory, Trump rallies his base and strengthens their belief that he's being unfairly targeted. This entire episode will likely have long-term consequences for Trump's 2024 presidential campaign. On one hand, it energizes his base, feeding into the idea that he's a political outsider fighting the system. His team will likely use the dismissal to bolster campaign ads and stump speeches, saying, "I beat them before, and I'll beat them again." On the other hand, Trump's opponents will use it to point out that the case isn't over. Expect to see political ads highlighting the fact that, "without prejudice," means the case can come back at any time. Critics will frame him as a candidate with unresolved legal troubles, questioning his ability to lead while facing ongoing investigations. With Trump still in the crosshairs of prosecutors, one big question remains: what happens if the case is refiled? In the next segment, we'll explore what Trump's legal future could look like and whether a conviction is possible. In this next segment, we bring in the experts, legal scholars, former prosecutors, and defense attorneys, to get a better understanding of the path ahead. With Judge Chutkan's dismissal, without prejudice, is a future prosecution against Donald Trump a real possibility? What strategies are prosecutors and defense attorneys likely to employ? And, most importantly, could Trump actually be convicted if the case is refiled? Let's hear from the people who know the system best. John Simmons, a former federal prosecutor, says Trump's legal troubles are far from over. According to Simmons, a dismissal without prejudice is not a win. It's a warning. It means prosecutors can refile at any time, and you can bet they'll come back stronger. He explains that prosecutors likely dismissed the case to fix weaknesses in the evidence, not because the charges were baseless. This gives them time to secure more witness testimony or add new charges, which could make it harder for Trump's legal team to defend him in a future trial. One of the most complicated aspects of this case is its unprecedented nature. Prosecuting a former president for crimes tied to a presidential election is uncharted territory. There's no playbook for it, and every legal move is under intense public scrutiny. Legal analyst Dr. Elliot Monroe explains that no judge, jury, or prosecutor wants to be seen as the one who took down a former president, even if the evidence is strong. Public perception, media coverage, and political consequences all add to the complexity of this case. If the prosecution does plan to refile, what would it take? Experts believe it boils down to three key factors. Keycap 1. New witness testimony. Prosecutors could seek out new witnesses or pressure existing witnesses to give stronger testimony. High-profile figures like Mark Meadows or former aides to Trump could play a pivotal role. Keycap 2. Stronger evidence. If prosecutors believe their evidence wasn't strong enough the first time, they may try to find new communications, documents, or recordings that bolster the case. Keycap 3 new charges. Instead of focusing on the original charges, prosecutors may pursue a different legal strategy. This could include focusing on conspiracy charges or targeting lesser-known legal violations related to Trump's alleged role in the January 6 insurrection. Convicting Donald Trump in a criminal case would be no easy task. First, prosecutors must prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest standard in criminal law. Trump's legal team will attack every piece of evidence, challenge the credibility of witnesses, and appeal any adverse rulings. With so much media attention, finding a fair and impartial jury will also be a monumental challenge. Jurors are human, and their opinions about Trump could affect the outcome. In our final segment, we'll examine what's next for Trump, the timeline for a potential refiling, and how it could impact the 2024 presidential election. The big question now, what happens next in Donald Trump's legal saga? Judge Chutkan's dismissal of the case, without prejudice, may feel like a reprieve, but it's far from the end of the road. So, what can we expect in the coming months? Prosecutors have one major option on the table, refiling the case. But this decision won't happen overnight. We can expect to see significant legal maneuvering behind the scenes as prosecutors gather more evidence, possibly secure more witnesses, or even pursue different charges. If the case does get refiled, the stakes will be higher. Prosecutors will want to make sure they have a stronger, more bulletproof case this time around. However, refiling could take months. Legal experts suggest we may not see any new moves from prosecutors until after the 2024 election cycle heats up, adding another layer of complexity to the timeline. As for Donald Trump, his response will be strategic. Expect a media blitz. He'll likely continue to portray any future prosecution as another form of political persecution, rallying his base with strong rhetoric. We can expect his attorneys to use every legal tool at their disposal, from filing motions to appeal to stalling tactics, all while positioning Trump as the underdog in a fight against a biased system. His team will likely do everything they can to drag this process out, turning the case into a political weapon to energize his supporters ahead of the 2024 presidential election. So, as we wait for the next move from prosecutors, one thing is clear, the battle is far from over. Whether or not Trump will face a future prosecution depends on what legal evidence emerges and how the political tide shifts. The road to the 2024 election could very well hinge on the outcome of these unprecedented legal proceedings. As we close this chapter, remember, the end is not yet written. The big question remains, what happens next? That's all for today's deep dive into the dismissal of Trump's D.C. case by Judge Tanya Chutkan. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay ahead of the latest legal battles involving Trump, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Leave a comment below, do you think the charges will be refiled? We want to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Unseen Evidence. Thanks for watching. For more interesting videos, please subscribe.